You're tuned into That's Life, where we celebrate the beauty, the chaos, and the wonder of real life. Sometimes it makes you laugh, sometimes it makes you cry, but it always makes you feel. Settle in. We're just getting started. Eleanor held boundless love in her heart for only one person, her son, David. She saw in him not just a child, but fate's highest reward. At the same time, her relationship with her daughter Sarah remained cool, almost estranged. Sarah grew up surprisingly independent and strong, and her mother, seeing her confidence, wasn't worried about her future. Things were different with David, even though he had long since become a successful young man. His mother's heart couldn't accept this fact, convinced that without her constant control and support, her son simply wouldn't cope with life. This was a deep, unshakable delusion that David tried in vain to free her from. All his attempts to loosen his mother's grip shattered against the wall of her certainty. In the end, he learned to live under this constant, though sometimes burdensome, supervision, having learned in childhood that arguing with mom was useless. The real difficulties in their relationship arose when David decided to get married. Emily was already the third girl, seriously vying for the role of his life partner. The two previous fiancés couldn't withstand the onslaught of the caring mother. They were worn down by the total control and preferred to break off the relationship. Emily turned out to be a girl of amazing patience and understanding. David had briefed her beforehand on all the intricacies of his mother's care and warned her that they would have to live under the same roof as Eleanor. "Davy, I understand. You don't choose your parents," Emily replied calmly. "Well, I'll try to find common ground with your mother." She added that she was ready to endure for the sake of the man she loved, for this woman had given him life. However, Emily didn't yet imagine how sophisticated and destructive Eleanor's fault-finding could be. Saturday was approaching, bringing with it the first meeting with her future mother-in-law. David and Emily decided not to inform Eleanor about the engagement yet, to avoid unnecessary pressure. Emily was very nervous before this meeting, realizing that her future with her beloved was at stake. She had asked David beforehand about his mother's tastes and dislikes, trying to prepare herself mentally. Despite all the information, the anxiety remained strong and palpable. Emily baked her potential mother-in-law's favorite honey cake, carefully chose her outfit, and waited for David. He arrived with a bouquet of flowers, picked her up, and they headed to his house. Eleanor was also preparing for the reception, but her mood was far from hospitable. Without even seeing the girl yet, she had already inwardly rejected her, being absolutely certain that no one ever could love and care for her son the way she could. In her mind, any other woman was inherently worse than a mother. Eleanor met them in the hallway, dressed nicely and with light makeup, creating an appearance of good nature. However, Emily physically felt a wave of negativity emanating from this woman. Perhaps for the first time in her life, she so clearly felt that she was completely unwelcome. But Emily wasn't used to backing down and was ready to endure the test for David's sake. During dinner, Eleanor asked standard questions about Emily's parents, housing, education, and work. Emily answered calmly and confidently. She truly had something to be proud of. She grew up in a good family. Her father was an army colonel, her mother a surgeon. Emily herself had graduated from medical school and successfully worked as a gastroenterologist in a private clinic. Emily's story impressed Eleanor. David's previous girlfriends were much simpler: a manicurist, a sales assistant. The mother-in-law liked that Emily came from a respectable family with a good education, and she might have even praised her had she not been vying for the position of her son's wife. Overall, the dinner passed without obvious scandals. David drove Emily home and returned, knowing that an inevitable serious conversation with his mother awaited him. She was waiting for him in the living room, and it was clear from her face that Emily had somehow still displeased her. David inwardly prepared to defend his choice. "Mom, what is it? Something's wrong again? What didn't you like about Emily?" He decided to go on the offensive immediately. His mother pretended to be surprised by the question. "Why did you decide she displeased me?" She continued. "Quite a nice girl, educated, cultured, pleasant to talk to." But David interrupted her, understanding where the conversation was heading. "But there's bound to be a but, isn't there?" "Yes, if it weren't for one but, I think she's boring," Eleanor finished. This was perhaps the most absurd complaint one could possibly invent. David couldn't help but laugh. "Mom, are you serious? Boring? Why do you think so?" "I don't know. It just seemed that way to me," his mother replied. And David understood that she simply couldn't find a more substantial reason for her dissatisfaction. Eleanor continued, trying to sow doubt. "How will you live with her? Have you thought about that?" David walked up to her and took her hands. "I'll live with her excellently, Mommy," he said firmly. "Stop looking for a black cat where there isn't one. Emily is a very good girl. Calm, well-mannered, exactly the kind you always wanted for me." He looked at her hopefully. "Listen, I'm 32 years old. I want a family and children. How much longer should I keep choosing?" Eleanor understood that her son was right, and it was high time for him to start his own family. However, the thought of having to share him with someone was unbearable, and even future grandchildren didn't warm her heart. She needed only David and no one else. "You're right, son. It's time for you to get married," she began her usual sad song. "It just seems to me that you're still a very little boy who needs his mother and her care more than anything in the world." "Mommy, don't say silly things," David gently objected. "I always need you and will live with you. I'm not going anywhere." He continued to persuade her. "We'll talk, have dinner together, go shopping, go to the dasha. Just one more person will appear in our house, and perhaps more over time." David tried to paint her a picture of a happy life together. "It's much more fun that way, and you won't be alone when I go on business trips." David looked at his mother with such pleading that Eleanor couldn't bear his gaze. She had never been able to refuse her beloved son. "All right, get married," she finally gave in. "I won't interfere." David joyfully hugged and kissed her. "Mommy, I knew you were the wisest woman in the world," he exclaimed. 2 months later, David and Emily got married, and the girl moved into her husband's house. The first few weeks went surprisingly smoothly. Emily couldn't even believe her luck that everything was working out so well. Eleanor behaved kindly, chatted nicely with her daughter-in-law, and even tried to help her with household chores. However, the ideal ended as soon as David left on a week-long business trip. The mask of goodwill fell away and complaints poured forth. You're not ironing David's shirts properly. The soup isn't salty enough. You've put too much salt in the porridge. The cups aren't in the right place. You can't sit in this armchair. This is David's armchair. Everyone knows that. The complaints came in a never-ending stream. Emily didn't understand how a person could change so much overnight, but she silently endured, re-ironing, rearranging, and correcting all her mistakes. The real nightmare began when Emily brought home a little kitten. David had told her that they always had cats, and Emily naively thought the fluffy little one would soften the atmosphere. She had agreed on the purchase with her husband, and he approved the idea, but Eleanor met the new resident with hostility. Why did you drag this flea-ridden thing into the house? Do you know I'm allergic to cat hair? You're doing this to spite me, she exclaimed. And then Emily's patience ran out. My dear Eleanor, what are you trying to achieve? She asked calmly but firmly. That Davy and I get divorced? That won't happen. We love each other. Emily continued, looking her mother-in-law directly in the eye. I discussed getting the kitten with your son, and he assured me that you always had cats and that you would like the idea. But it turns out you're ready to deny even that just because I brought the kitten. Her voice was confident. The only thing you'll achieve with this attitude is that we'll move out into a rented apartment and you'll be left alone. Does that option suit you? Emily didn't let her mother-in-law answer, continuing, I don't think so. So either we live peacefully or we leave. You can forget about us breaking up. And then she added, uttering the words that were meant to change everything. I'm expecting a baby. Eleanor looked at her daughter-in-law with completely different eyes. So, you have a character after all, girl, she thought to herself. Aloud, she said something quite different. I don't want you to move somewhere else. Maybe I am being a little picky, but you must understand me. She tried to justify herself. I'm a mother. I want my son's happiness. Emily replied, and you think I came into his life to ruin it? Have I ever given you reason to think so badly of me? No. Eleanor turned to leave, but then turned back to her daughter-in-law. All right, let's live peacefully, she said, adding with unexpected concern, especially since you shouldn't be getting upset. After this conversation, Eleanor's behavior truly changed. She stopped looking for reasons to find fault, tried to spend more time in her room, and crossed paths with her daughter-in-law less often. Emily noticed that the kitten, whom she named Jasper, became a frequent guest in her mother-in-law's room. Eleanor picked him up even more often than Emily herself did. Life under one roof gradually improved. The tension subsided. 2 years passed, and Emily and David had a son, whom they named Edward after David's father. His father was a policeman and tragically died in the line of duty. Eleanor always remembered her husband fondly, while David barely remembered his father, as he was only 4 years old when he died. Little Eddie grew up, and his grandmother actively participated in his life. She often played with her grandson, took him for walks while Emily did household chores. Eleanor's attitude towards her daughter-in-law hadn't changed radically. She still disliked her, but now she did so silently, without open conflicts. David worked a lot and often went on business trips. Their family life flowed calmly and measuredly, However, as often happens, unforeseen circumstances burst into their quiet haven. David had to go away for a whole month to another country. Emily really didn't want him to go, but the business trip was mandatory. A couple of days after he left, Emily noticed strange things in Eleanor's behavior. She became silent, stopped playing with her grandson, and looked depressed. Gathering her courage, Emily decided to talk to her mother-in-law. "Eleanor, is something bothering you?" she asked hesitantly. "Maybe something hurts? Tell me, I'm a doctor." Her mother-in-law replied calmly, "Nothing hurts. Everything is fine." But Emily didn't believe her and decided to observe. The next day, she accidentally overheard Eleanor talking to someone on the phone and asking for help. Emily didn't understand exactly what was being discussed, but the phrase, "I need your support," sounded clear. Eleanor had many acquaintances, friends, and relatives, but she could only ask the closest ones for help. Emily called David, feeling growing anxiety. "Davy, you need to talk to Mom urgently. Something is happening with her, and she's not telling me anything." Emily told him about the overheard conversation. "I heard her asking for help, but I didn't understand what kind." "You talked to her? Maybe it's something with her health? I can help." "Okay, Emmy, I'll definitely talk to her today," David promised. He asked, "And generally, how are things with you?" Emily replied, "Oh, fine. It's just that your mother isn't herself. It's making me anxious." David reassured her, "I understand. I'll call you tonight after I talk to her." In the evening, David called back and informed her that his mother's test results were bad. The doctor at the clinic was insisting on urgent surgery, but his mother was afraid to go. "Emmy, try talking to her again," David asked. "I convinced Mom to show you the tests. She seemed to agree. But show her care and attention. You know her character. Do this for me, please." "Davy, I'm worried about her myself," Emily replied sincerely. "I'll do everything I can." She resolutely headed to her mother-in-law's room. "Eleanor, I understand that you dislike me and perhaps consider me a bad daughter-in-law. But please, let me help you anyway." And then something completely unexpected for Emily happened. Eleanor wept bitterly. Emily was even frightened. "Eleanor, what is it? Is it that bad? Cancer?" she asked with alarm. "No," her mother-in-law replied through tears, and her words astonished Emily. "It's just that I turned to my daughter. She doesn't have time to go to hospital with me." Eleanor continued, her voice trembling with hurt and pain. "But that's understandable. I always focus only on David. She has reason to resent me." She spoke of her loneliness. "My sister is also caught up in her own affairs and problems. My close friend and best friend are at the Dasha. They won't come for my sake. They say, 'You have children.' And it turns out no one cares about me." Tears streamed down her face. "And I'm scared, you understand? Very scared." "All right, let's calm down," Emily said, moving closer. "You'll tell me everything in detail." Eleanor showed her the test results and recounted the doctor's words about the need for urgent surgery, about lost time, and an uncertain outcome. Emily carefully studied the results and then looked at her mother-in-law in surprise. "Which clinic were you at?" "Our District 1?" Emily asked. She continued confidently, "I don't see anything terrible, let alone irreparable, in your test results. I'll call my gynecologist right now, and we'll go for a consultation tomorrow. I'm sure this is some kind of mistake." Eleanor looked at her with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Really? Emily nodded firmly. Really? The next day, Emily and Eleanor went to the medical center where Emily worked for a consultation with her acquaintance, the gynecologist. The doctor listened carefully to all of her mother-in-law's complaints and examined the test results, expressing extreme surprise regarding the decision of his colleague from the district clinic. Eleanor, I assure you, you have no indications for surgery, he said. The doctor reassured her, I will prescribe you treatment, you'll undergo it, and everything will be fine. Eleanor cried again, but this time they were tears of relief. The doctor, turning to Emily, asked, Em, can you go see this specialist yourself? Let her explain why she scared your mother-in-law. You can't scare people like that. Emily nodded. Don't worry, Andrew. I'll sort it out. When they left the center, Eleanor stopped, took Emily's hand, and spoke words Emily had never expected to hear. Emmy, please forgive me, she said, and her voice trembled with emotion. I was very unhappy. I found fault with you for no reason. I am guilty before you. Tears welled up in her eyes again. And you turned out to be the only person who came to my aid. Her mother-in-law continued, her words coming from the heart. After all, if I had gone to a doctor with someone else, they would have sent me for surgery. No one would have bothered to investigate. She squeezed Emily's hand tightly. Thank you, my girl. Thank you so much. I promise you, I will be the most loving mother-in-law in the world. Emily also cried, touched by such a sincere confession and warmth. It's all right, Eleanor, Emily replied through tears. We are one family and should help and support each other. Her mother-in-law quietly remarked, more often in life is the opposite. Strangers support and help while your own people don't have time? Emily smiled through her tears. Well, then we are the exception to the rule. She suggested, let's go home. Eddie is waiting for us there with my mom. Suddenly, Eleanor stopped sharply and looked at her daughter-in-law with new determination. Now you listen to me. Just don't interrupt, she said. Her mother-in-law continued, I want to thank you so that you see, not just in words, but in deeds, that I have changed. She announced her decision. I will sign over my share of the apartment to you so that you and Davy are always on equal footing. That will be fair. Emily tried to object, but Eleanor interrupted her with playful strictness. Now don't argue with me. She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, that smile was sincere and warm. On this matter, I will be categorical, strict, as a mother-in-law should be, she added, and hugged her daughter-in-law.